Why didn't Jesus know the hour of the tribulation and the Olivet prophecies? In Mark 13:32, Jesus says, "But concerning that day or that hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father." In this verse, Jesus says that only the Father in heaven knows the hour when these events will happen. But this verse appears to contradict the doctrine of the Trinity. If Jesus is fully God, then shouldn't he know the hour as well? It appears as though he is less in ontological status to the Father and cannot have access to certain pieces of knowledge. However, there are possible answers to this. Most Christians respond to this by pointing out that Jesus was both fully God and fully man, and during his earthly ministries, prior to his resurrection, he willingly cooperated with the limitations of being human. He suffered hunger, he had to sleep and rest, and he felt grief and pain. Jesus was fully man, and yet he was worshipped too, forgave sins, and claimed divine eternal status with the Father. This is the hypostatic union. Christ had two natures, and during his earthly ministry, he cooperated with the limitations of being fully human. Of course, this is because he is divine, who became fully man. Hebrews 2:9 says, "For a little while, he was made lower than the angels, so that he could suffer death for everyone." Philippians 2:6-7 says, "Jesus was equal with God, but willingly emptied himself and became human." So the scriptures teach us Jesus emptied himself, and thus suffered with the limitations of being human, which meant he surrendered properties like omnipresence and omniscience. This is seen in the fact that Jesus spent years learning and educating himself. And it also explains why Jesus didn't know the hour when that tribulation would occur. Jesus cooperated with the limitations of being human and wasn't fully omniscient. However, after his resurrection, he was once again in full glory with the Father and was omniscient and omnipresent. So this is the answer most Christians give. However, there are problems with this explanation. That is not to say that it's incorrect, just that it doesn't explain everything. The most notable is the fact that in Mark 13:32, Jesus says only the Father knows, but why not the Holy Spirit? If the Holy Spirit is fully God, then shouldn't he know as well? Why wouldn't Jesus say the Father and the Holy Spirit know the hour? Well, some have tried to answer this by suggesting that perhaps the Holy Spirit willingly limited his knowledge as well, but this almost seems ad hoc. Is there any answer a Christian can give on this? In fact, yes, there is. If we look at the entire passage this verse comes from in Mark 13 and Matthew 24, and if we look at the cultural context, a different picture emerges of what Jesus was actually alluding to. In ancient Jewish cultures, marriages were almost always prearranged. After arrangements were made, the young groom would begin building additions onto his father's house where he and his future wife would live. The custom was that the father of the groom would decide when the additions were finished and was ready for the young couple to move in, which meant only the father knew when it was time for him to get his bride. But this doesn't mean the groom actually didn't know when the time was. A wedding was a bigger event in those days than it is even today. It was a community-wide event. This meant people would have to plan for them far in advance and set aside time from their usual daily work. Dates would need to be known weeks before so people could adjust their work schedules for the wedding. Food would also have to be prepared in advance. There was of course no refrigeration or supermarkets, so arrangements for food needing livestock and crops were planned well in advance. Everyone would know when the time was getting close, as the traditional wedding food would need to be readied and prepared. However, despite it being obvious to everyone when the wedding would take place, in order to give respect to the father of the groom, it would naturally be said that only the father knows when the groom was going to get his bride. But obviously the groom would not have been unaware of the day or the hour, as it would have been obvious to everyone in the community. So with this in mind, a new understanding of Matthew 24:36 and Mark 13:32 can be seen. Jesus was not claiming that he or the Holy Spirit did not know the hour of his return, but was explaining what the events leading up to the tribulation would be like. It would be like that of an ancient Jewish wedding, where everyone would know it's drawing near and the Father will give the word for it to take place. But the events leading up to it will be seen and understood by all. If we look at Mark 13:32 in context, we see it actually makes more sense with this understanding. Prior to saying this, Jesus gives another example of how we will know when the tribulation will take place. He says to learn from the fig tree. As soon as its branches put out its leaves, you know summer is near. So also, when you see these taking place, you know that he is near. Likewise, Jesus then gives another example by alluding that it will be like a Jewish wedding, when the father will give the word for his son to get his bride. So he borrows phraseology from a Jewish custom. So it is likely Jesus wasn't saying he truly doesn't know, but that he gives respect and authority to the Father to give the word when these things will happen. But he and the Holy Spirit would know, just like the community knows when the wedding will take place. As we said in our video which explains the Trinity, the doctrine of the Trinity says the Son and the Spirit submit to the Father's authority. Jesus was simply reiterating that here, and explaining the events leading up to the tribulation will be like that of the events leading up to a Jewish wedding.